G7 leaders meeting in southern Germany have agreed to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in global infrastructure. The move aims to help developing countries and counter China's drive to exert influence in emerging economies through large-scale investments. But it's Russia's war in Ukraine that's dominating the three-day meeting of the world's 7 richest democracies, including the global economic impact of Moscow's invasion.
They are meeting in the tranquil surroundings of the Bavarian Alps. But top of the agenda is, of course, the war in Ukraine and the worldwide fallout.
We've just tried to overcome a global pandemic, and it shook the global economy. And then, as the global economy was just recovering, Russia's vicious attack on Ukraine happened, driving prices up everywhere from food to energy and casting deep uncertainty, especially in the most fragile countries.
As host, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says the world is facing economic difficulties just as big as the problems of the 1970s when the G7 was starting out.
Falling growth rates, rising inflation, raw material shortages and supply chain disruptions. These are no small challenges, and we must share the responsibility.
US President Joe Biden announced a $600 billion G7 initiative to boost infrastructure in developing countries, with the aim of countering China's growing global influence.
But developing countries often lack the essential infrastructure to help navigate global shocks like a pandemic. So they feel the impacts more acutely, and they have a harder time recovering. In our deeply connected world, that's not just a humanitarian concern, it's an economic and a security concern for all of us.
Tight security has so far prevented any unrest at the summit, but protesters have gathered on the fringes, mainly climate change campaigners and activists opposing Germany's plans for a big rise in defense spending. The leaders are considering more measures to punish Russia for the war in Ukraine. The US, Canada, Japan and Britain have all announced a ban on imports of Russian gold. The overall message is one of unity in the face of aggression.
Let's cross over to our political correspondent, Julia Saudelli. She's in Garmisch-Partenkirchen near the summit venue. Julia, Ukraine's president is expected to address the G7 meeting there today. Are the leaders gathered there united in their approach to the war in Ukraine?
Yes, unity is the message that the leaders here have been wanting to portray already yesterday, but also today when they're going to speak to Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. They are united in criticizing Russia for its attack against Ukraine, which has been defined as brutal or other similar adjectives that have been really critical against Russia, but also in their support towards Ukraine. And they are trying to show this support not only with words, but also with practical plans. For example, there are discussions about possibly implementing a ban on gold imports from Russia, gold imports that are a big source of income from Russia and are mostly exported to G7 countries. But also there are talks about implementing a price cap on oil exports from Russia. And these are all things that the leaders may want to present to Zelenskyy today. And they really want to show the Ukrainian president that the G7 countries are there also in the long term.
Now, helping the world deal with climate change is another major topic for the G7. That's been the case in the past as well. How are the leaders there approaching that?
Climate change has taken a bit of a back seat now that the war in Ukraine has been the dominating topic at the G7. But we shouldn't forget that climate change is actually connected in some way to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, because a lot of G7 countries now have the urgent need to make themselves independent of Russian fossil fuels, and they have to do that quickly. And it is an opportunity for them to actually pursue faster and bigger development of renewable energies in the future. And that is something that Chancellor Olaf Scholz also wants to bring home. He has a plan, he has an idea to create a climate club of willing countries who can be an example and show leadership leadership in terms of building up renewable energy and promoting sustainability. And that is something that is also really on the minds of the protesters here at the G7. Climate has been one of the main topics. I spoke to many of them, and they really want the G7 to take concrete and fast action in fighting climate change.
Julia, thank you so much. Our correspondent Julia Saudelli there in Garmisch-Partenkirchen. For some more analysis, let's bring in Stefan Meister here. He's head of the program on international order and democracy at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Stefan, thanks for being with us. What do you make of the proposals put forth by G7 leaders for countering Russian aggression in Ukraine and softening the economic fallout from the war?
I think we have reached the limit of sanctions from the Western side. So now we are discussing gold. I think which will have an impact on the Russian economy. But as long as Russia still can sell oil and gas globally, as long as India and China and other big countries are buying Russian gas and the Russian even the Russian welfare fund is growing, I don't see that Putin will make here any compromise. I think he will not make any compromises anyway, because he wants Ukraine to get under control. But I think this is first of all about unity, this summit. But I don't think it will change Russian policy at the moment.
The war in Ukraine, Stefan, is a defining moment for the West, which the G7 embodies to some degree. How severely do you see the West's influence in the world being tested as a consequence of this war?
I think it is impressive how united Western countries are. G7 is somehow back. Yeah, it was a declining format, but I think Western democracies understand that they have to coordinate and to cooperate more in the light of the Russian war. At the same time, we can also see the limits. We can see that other countries like India, like China, but also Brazil, South Africa, they do not follow Western countries on sanctions. So we see a changing order, which is neither unipolar nor bipolar. It's multipolar, and we can see that. But other major countries neither follow Russia nor follow the G7.
You mentioned India and South Africa. They're among a number of other countries, including Indonesia and Senegal, that have been invited to attend the G7 this year. They are represented there. What role are those countries playing at that G7?
I think G7 understand that they have to engage with these countries. There is a growing axis, or you can call it, between China and Russia as authoritarian states. And you have countries like India, which are democracies, but you also have other countries who are partly democracies. Yeah, and I think there is a growing understanding that you have to engage with major Asian, African, and South American countries as G7, as Western countries, to react to challenges in the global world, and that they need a place also on the table to discuss major challenges like the Russian war in Ukraine and the consequences of this war for global economy and food security.
You said that you see a multipolar world emerging. Where do you see the West, particularly the United States and Europe, their importance is it being diminished in this multipolar world that you see emerging?
So it's the end of the US unipolar world. That means it is a decline also of the US power in global politics. Europeans have to invest in security. They have to become more independent, more autonomous also on security issues from the US, who is not able and willing anymore to play the global police. So you can say in the end, this war strengthened G7, strengthened Western democracies in their cooperation, but it has shown also the limits of these countries. And we can see that other major players like China, India, Indonesia are becoming more important. So you can argue it's a diminishing of Western powers, but at the same time, if they are united, they are still strong and they can make a difference.
Stefan, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Stefan Meister from the German Council on Foreign Relations here in Berlin.
Thank you.